anytime, any day. Why not right now? Stop looking up to your boss and start being your own boss. Don't work for paychecks. Work for dreams with no regrets. This is Cracking the Entrepreneur Code. If you have the passion, we'll create the blueprint. Now, your host. You know him from his 7 tips to build the business you always wanted, and now you're about to hear a lot more. Jack H.M. Wong.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Cracking the Entrepreneur Code podcast show. And in this episode, I'm happy to bring along one of a very, very successful entrepreneurs, and he is Ira Pastor, and he is the Chief Executive Officer of his company called Bioquark, and he has been in the pharmaceutical industry for many years. Hi, Ira. How are you doing?
Great, Jack. Thanks so much for having me. Hello to everybody in Singapore, too.
Yes, hi. And thank you very much, first of all, because when you sent me the bio, I was very impressed. It is a one-shot paragraph, but you see the credentials, I don't even dare to pronounce them. Reason? Well, they're just solid. Would you be able to just share a little bit more about yourself, your biopharmaceutical background to my audiences?
Sure. So I'm a pharmacist by undergraduate training that went to business school. But I joke a bit that my real education began when I was a young child. Basically hanging around my father's pharmacy. My father was an entrepreneur here in the Philadelphia area back in the 1960s. And from a very young age, I would be around him sort of seeing what it took to grow a very small business into something successful. And from a very young age, realizing that you needed to work hard to be successful. So I followed in my father's footsteps, learned sort of, the retail pharmacy business and about pharmaceutical distribution and OTC. And ultimately, we grew the business to a decent enough size that we became an acquisition target for a large pharmaceutical company, SmithKline Beecham Pharmaceuticals, in the 1990s. So there I made my jump from, what began as a small entrepreneurial business into something, multi-billion-dollar international pharmaceutical industry, which I then spent the next couple decades in learning the big business side of the picture. But I always had that desire, that passion of an entrepreneur that, as interesting as being in a multi-billion-dollar company, I still had that drive to do something on my own that had a bigger purpose. And so that made my full cycle back to what I'm doing now, which is decidedly more advanced and futuristic, but at the same time, we're focusing on the true future of healthcare in the sense of human regeneration, repair, and rejuvenation using biotechnology. And starting out again as a young, still entrepreneur that's really ready to make an impact on the 21st century this time around.
Right.
So, I went from small to big and back down to small, and I enjoy small and risky, honestly. It's more exciting.
Everyone is different, and I love the fact that, I actually had another episode with another guest earlier on, and to me, there's always a reason behind why a person decides to become an entrepreneur, and your story seems to be because of your father's influence somehow, and you got into this pharmaceutical industry. And I must say that, first of all, this is fortuitous because not every parent, I know my friends, for example, not every parent is actually an entrepreneur. So I can't say, because I'm an entrepreneur, my father, my mother are entrepreneur, so I follow their footsteps. And it's I'm just speaking about my own story. My father, my mother actually run their own businesses, and for decades also. And they're actually umbrellas importer, exporter back in Hong Kong, which is where I was from. And what happened was that I didn't follow their footsteps to succeed the business. Actually, my sister did, not me. So I actually went to the corporate world for so many years. Before 7 years ago, I decided to leave the corporate world and become entrepreneur. So I'm sure that your father has created a very significant impact on you, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't want to discount my mother because while my father was a big idea man growing a
Right.
business, my mother was a finance expert.
Oh,
So she kept him in line with regard to money flows and cash
right.
flow and things of this nature. So together they made a great business pair. I can't say that I would want to go into business with my wife,
Right.
but at the same time there was a an interesting balance there, both entrepreneurialism and at the same time, risk management and
Right.
how you have to merge both worlds. But yes,
Isn't
the
amazing
parents.
because like your parents and let me talk about your parents and my parents. My mother is also the finance. I'll call my mother as the finance minister of our house, and she managed all the monies of the whole family. So we have very similar background to a certain extent. I learned a
Absolutely.
lot of the finance stuff from my mother in terms of money management, risk management. So there's a reason why we are on this show together.
I think so.
All right. Okay, can you share with us a little bit about what is your risk? Because you said that your risk tolerance or your risk appetite is heavily influenced by your mother. Like when like people actually ask when they become an entrepreneur, it's already risky, and you know what? It's better not to take risks. It's better to actually stay with the job. But somehow your risk profile suggests that you want to take risks and become entrepreneur. So my question is that always true? Where if a person doesn't want to take risks, he or she will never become an entrepreneur. So how do we balance that risk appetite, if you like?
I, I think we have to balance it with a nice dose of creative thinking
Right.
and once again, passion, because, the second side to this story is that, I, aside from having a wonderful upbringing with my parents, at the same time, I saw them taken from me by cancer and lung disease and heart
Mm,
disease and things of this nature. And growing up in an industry that is supposed to take care of sickness, I was very dismayed by the fact that, a multi-billion-dollar industry as the pharmaceutical industry was incapable of, curing them at the end of the day and helping them and
mm,
keeping them away from the grasp of death. So I
mm,
had that not only the sort of the desire to do something different, but at the same time something real and in my face. And I believe that that obviously twixt the balance a bit between the
mm,
amount of risk you're willing to accept and move forward with. And I'm completely open to that. And I think, I always point out to people in this industry, specifically when it comes to biopharma,
mm,
you have to come into this accepting the fact that this is an industry of failure. And when I say it's an industry of failure, I mean the chances of you succeeding with a new drug are something like 1 in 40,000.
1 in 40.
So
Okay.
from the very beginning that
Mm,
the odds are against you.
mm.
But if that doesn't scare you off, I always joke, if you were the type of person that, when you were younger and I ask a pretty girl on a date and she says no, if that bothers you, you're probably not the one that wants to get involved in biotech. But if you can take rejection, if you can take failure and learn from your failure, please, it's the place to be.
Talking about the high risk nature of your industry. So if I cannot accept the risk, I better not step into your industry. So that's what I've been hearing. And at the same time, I guess that you also mentioned the fact that you have a very strong mission, your strong passion about helping people. And is it true that if you have a very strong passion, that can somehow overcome the fear of failure?
Absolutely, completely, because I just look at the future. I
Mm,
realize the big problems that we have facing us in terms of the human condition, so health and disease, whether they be the Alzheimer's or diabetes or cancer or heart failure. In 2018, we still are in a very strange position where we generate trillions of dollars in the healthcare industry, but we make very small progress. And so I see the area of regenerative medicine, which is what we're focusing on in terms of the ability to finally get to a point of curing something as opposed to just treating it, as just such an exciting moment in human history that I want to be a big part of it.
Right.
and it really, in my mind, diminishes the fear of failure and the risk profile.
Right. Talking about your experience, you mentioned like you have decades of experience, not a few years, but decades of experience in this industry. Is there any like very interesting stories you can share about facing failure? I'm sure you have a lot of failures, I presume, and how do you overcome them each time? Are there any interesting stories that you can share with my audiences?
Yeah, I mean, one, and this really doesn't have to do with the failure of drug development per se, but even if you are successful in developing that new miracle cure for cancer or heart disease, you still have a whole area of so-called regulatory risk.
Oh, yeah.
That a regulatory agency may just, send you back for a couple of years to do X, Y, and Z, and hence you need another $100 million to do so forth and so on. And I've been in that position before. I mean, I've been at least here in the United States, at FDA with late stage drugs which look beautiful in the clinic and work in hundreds of patients, yet there's always that chance that you have somebody, a bureaucrat, that they want you to spend 2 more years studying, what happens if you study it for 12 months instead of 6 months. And you know what? You can't say no. So you have to do it.
Yep.
And so you just have to be accepting on one hand that there is always a higher sort of system of oversight that you have to keep in mind is there. It's better to make them your partner at the end of the day than try to fight them, because they're more powerful in many ways than, the President of the United States.
Right.
So, those are, that's one example. And then, obviously there's always failures in the lab at the level of sort of the bench, as we call it. Experiments, that work beautifully on a Monday, you try them again on a Thursday, and you get the complete opposite result. And this is no joke, because, there's a current estimate that every year we spend something like $30 billion on so-called irreproducible research in the literature. So, that's an amazing number when you think $30 billion on experiments that showed something that someone then tried and didn't show the same thing. So, you're surrounded by this type of problem, and all it is a matter of keeping your head down and just moving on to the next experiment and hoping that one works.
Yeah, I guess your industry happens to be one of those which is subject to heavy regulation. I mean, it's same as the financial industry. And you said very nicely that you're making friends with the regulators rather than making enemies, because at the end of the day, they have a bigger influence over you, and there's no point of actually fighting against them because it doesn't serve any purpose. So it's a very, very interesting industry. I have experiences with the financial industry in Singapore, which is heavily regulated. And similarly, when someone actually launched a new product, and similarly, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, who is the regulator here in finance industry, might raise questions, and my clients will say, hey, I'm very annoyed because I'm about to be able to launch the product, but how come the regulator suddenly on the 11th hour ask a lot of unnecessary questions? So I actually told my client, stay calm, because they are there for a reason. They just want to make sure that the public is protected. I mean, that is the underlying statement. So very interesting. How about other stories? Like how about other stories you can share in your experience previously before you become the CEO of Bioquark? I mean, some of the other experiences you have in terms of like overcoming failure, overcoming difficulties, obstacles. What are some of these interesting stories that you can share with us?
Let's see. I definitely, the what that's one example is clearly the success in the clinic, but a failure at the level of the regulatory system. Another I can think of, I mentioned I went through M&A events in the past, experiencing sort of what it takes, once you are successful to then make that so-called liquidity event happen for you and your investors. And that's always fun as well, because what I've experienced 11th hour, negotiations, everything's ready to be signed. But then for some reason, you're agreeing to a $20 million buyout, but all of a sudden somebody thinks in the very last hour that your company's only worth $16 million.
Oh.
Why does that happen? and who's pulling those strings? Yeah. And I've been at that situation a few times, and I've never really understood how valuation after, investment bankers have gone back and forth for months on those types of topics could change in a matter of 3 minutes. But that type of stuff I've experienced as well. And, I laugh at it in the sense that I guess it's all part of the power game that a larger organization likes to play when dealing with smaller folks on the other side of the table, in quotes. But I've seen that as well. And once again, you can't say you can't walk away from the table at the 11th hour, and you have to smile and take what you take. But everyone's going to experience that as well.
It's all about one decision. I mean, mergers and acquisition to me is always like when people ask how urgent and when is the deadline exactly for the deal to be closed. I mean, as an attorney, in the past, I always said, well, it was actually due yesterday. This actually is always the case. There's no time. There's no time or no room for you to think about it, because you either say yes or the buyer will just walk away very quickly. But I like the fact that you mentioned you have experienced this, because to be frank to my audiences, when you set up a business, you may be very worrying about the fact that how you grow your business. Like Ira's scenario, I give credits to the fact that he experienced the exit of a business, which is always one of the important steps to me, because when you grow a business, the step that you want to become very, very rich is actually sell the business to another person. And to sell the business is always the best deal, because you can always start a new one, like you move to another smaller one and do again, because your passion is always there. It drives you continuously, regardless of whether you are working in company A or doing business B. Your passion is the main fuel for you to do what you're doing today. So I hope that I've summarized it correctly. Any things that you want to add on this?
I think just from a perspective, I know people sometimes find it difficult. It's sort of like raising a child. You grow this to a certain level, and then you marry her off to another family, or so forth. And you can't always think about it that you're losing a daughter, but that there is a new family that's going to go as a result of that. And if your deal and your partner is right, you are in essence creating the next several generations of something that could be much bigger and grander, and will blossom organically with a larger, deeper pocketed parent. Right. So it's not always about losing something that through an M&A event, although obviously you make money, but you obviously have that part of you that, was passionate about something, just like you're passionate about raising a child. You want them to have a better life than you did. So,
that's right. So for people who are looking, I always have this question, like I asked the other guests the other day as well. When someone said, you know what, I want to leave the job because I found I have no time for myself, for my family. The reason why I couldn't leave my job is I don't know what I want to do in life. And if you ask me what's my passion, I do not know. Perhaps my passion is watching TV. I mean, that's my passion. So that's the reason why most people, like in Singapore, they couldn't really leave their jobs because they are restrained by not being able to identify the passion. So for you, it seems to be very, very natural because of your father's influence. Like if someone were to ask you, like, Ira, how do I find my passion? What would be your advice to these people?
I would advise, and this is, I say this jokingly in a way, but it's true with me as well. Think about what your passion was when you were 5 years old. My passion when I was 5 was comic books and superheroes and wanting to see the future develop, science fiction.
Right.
And though I think of those things as childish, I still sit with my children and I watch the future unfold in fiction, and I read comic books with them, and I take them to the movies. Why? Because whether it's today or whether it was 40 years ago when I was a toddler, I loved how the future and not just the current future, but the distant future could be created with a little science, technology, and innovative thought. So maybe today you're worried about paying the bills and you have this problem here and you're taking care of a mother and maybe you're clouded by your thinking, but underneath that cloud is still your history. It's still about everything you grew desiring, what made you happy when you were younger. And I think if you can dig into that, I think you can become aware and reawaken some of that potential. And you might find, hey, that you loved cooking when you were younger, or you loved, construction. And here you are sitting in that finance office in wherever, making a lot of money, but it's not what you really, really wanted. And so I say, go to the past, look to the past and remember who you were, who you are still inside, and try to dig up those nuggets of possibility.
Very, very insightful, because for me, I didn't know how to advise my client, my coaching clients. I mean, if that question was asked maybe a few years back. Right now, like you said correctly, and I totally agree with you, passion can always be uncovered by looking from the present to the past, because the past is actually the dots where you can connect them to find out exactly what is the passion that you have been searching. Many people have unfortunately treat passion as something on a going forward basis. They are looking, what will be my passion, instead of going back to the timeline to identify their passion. So thank you very much for that. In terms of the current, you're saying that right now you're moving back to a smaller firm environment and you actually enjoy it with higher risk. And my question is that, what is your next game plan for the next perhaps like 5 years? What do you see yourself? Where are you, and what do you see yourself in your business in 5 years down the road?
So our business really has two platforms. On one side, we are a traditional biopharmaceutical development company, and I foresee, based on our strategic plan, that we will be on the market in 5 years with a registered biologic product for at least one condition, one therapeutic condition here in the U.S. Simultaneously, we are also involved in the consumer products business and the non-RX health business, and we are now slowly but surely beginning to launch a series of brands related to our core technology on that front in terms of skincare and nutrition. And we foresee that being, at least a $50 million in revenue generating business within 5 years. So we are excited on both fronts. The hybrid of prescription and non-prescription products is exciting to us because it gives us both short and long-term possibilities. Whether we'll split the company in the future, if a pharmaceutical company wants to acquire certain parts, is still up in the air. But those are our 5-year goals.
Very good, because from this short discussion, Ira seems to me is a futurist, because somehow you can see the future, you can project yourself to the future, you are visionary, and to a lot of the business owners, successful business owner, I believe, like Steve Jobs, he is a very, very strong visionary. If you have a very strong vision about yourself in future plus your business, you will kind of know where you're heading to in the near future. I remember one of my coaches actually said that in order to be leader of the organization, you need to be a futurist. You need to see the future. If you can't, then your business can't grow. That is what my coach has told me. And at the same time, he said like most people can't scale the business because they're so worried about their present and the past. They can't see the future. They are clouded, like you put it. So this is a very, very wise message for my audiences to understand. You need to see the future. If not, you can't grow your businesses. You cannot even grow yourself. Okay, so in every single interview, I always will ask my guests one favorite quote, and Ira has given me this quote. He actually quoted a very famous one from Thomas Edison. I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps. How does it apply to you in your life?
Yeah, I mean, Edison, clearly personifies in that one statement what you need, at least in my industry, and I think in many other industries, there are going to be 1,000 steps, 1,000 hiccups, 1,000 potential failures before you get there. And, I've always joked around that I would, if I had a time machine, I would love to go back and talk to him when he was on, failure 426, because it would marvel at, what would keep him going. I mean, there's people that and I know nowadays that would get to step 2 and quit because they're that afraid of failing. So Edison, I think, the penultimate example of somebody that stayed with it, especially in an era where he was a futurist beyond futurist at the time compared to what existed in terms of gas lamps and candles. So I think that's a beautiful analogy.
We have so many people who are afraid of failure. I mean, partly from my study and my research, it has a lot to do with our traditional education system, because the story is always, well, you are not allowed to fail because failure means you'll be out of school, you'll be punished, etc. So we have grown up and have been conditioned that we can't fail. The best way not to fail is not to take action, because that is a safe environment. As long as I don't move, I can't fail. And that's why a lot of people are afraid of making the move forward, because of this mind conditioning thing happens during their childhood. So I believe that, we the entrepreneurs are always advocating to the rest who want to start a business, who is thinking of starting a business. You will fail. And because failure is actually part of our life. I mean, Ira, do you agree that failure is actually part and parcel of our process?
Absolutely.
Until they experience that, no matter how many times we say this, my audiences somehow, my experience again, that my audiences will just take this statement as, okay, yeah, so that is your experience. As long as I don't take action, I will be okay. So until they experience by themselves, what we say is just a statement. Doesn't mean anything. So for my audiences, Ira has once again affirmed what I've told you guys. You've got to take action. You've got to move forward, because failure is part and parcel of this journey of becoming an entrepreneur. Thank you very much. I would like to ask one final question. When you have a very strong mission and a very strong vision, especially in your case, do you believe that success is just a matter of time?
Yeah, pretty much, with the exception of one. With the exception of keeping in mind or knowing if there's any external forces, whether they be regulatory, whether they be competitive, that want to not see you succeed.
Right.
But that being said, yes, you can beat time always with the right mindset and the right passion and the right sort of strategic plan.
Okay, that's very good. So I think we have we have over 30 minutes already, and once again, Ira, I really thank you for sharing with my audiences your entrepreneurship journey, and this is insightful. And most importantly, thank you for sharing with us, myself included, your wisdom about the meaning of failure, which is essential as part and parcel of the entrepreneurship journey. Is there any way that our audiences can reach out to you?
Sure. Just come to bioquark.com. So BIOQUARK.com. And from there, you can find out everything about our programs, our strategic relationships. We're all over social media, but definitely reach out with questions at the website. We're an open, transparent company, and we love talking about what we do and our vision. So please reach out.
Okay, thanks very much once again. And this will conclude this episode of Cracking the Entrepreneur Code. So I will see all of you next time, and I'm going to invite another guest sharing with all of you the wisdom of his or her entrepreneurship journey, experiences, and wisdom. Jack Wong here. I'm signing off now, and bye-bye.
To continue cracking the entrepreneur code, subscribe for more episodes and download the Amazon bestseller, Cracking the Entrepreneur Code, 7 Tips to Build the Business You Always Wanted at crackingentrepreneurcode.com. Learn more about author and host Jack H.M. Wong and book your 30-minute discovery session to overcome any professional challenge at jackhmwong.com/apply.